What a blessing that song was. Believe it or not, we used to have a songster brigade here that used to sing those sorts of songs, and they brought much blessing to the congregation. Before I start, quite a bit of research has gone into what I have to say this morning, and a lot of what I have say has been brought from books which I've read, Salvation Army publications, one in particular, Brass Bands of the Salvation Army, Their Mission and Their Music by Ronald W. Holtz. It has 1,000 pages in it, and it covers most of the worldwide story about the Salvation Army Band. So a lot of what I say this morning has come from that book and from this book here, which is The History of the Salvation Army in New Zealand by Corps Sergeant Major Cyril Bradwell, written for the centenary of New Zealand. It's a very interesting book, and it doesn't just cover the music side of things, but all the history of the Corps in New Zealand. There are 3 or 4 copies in the Corps library, so if you want to catch up on the history of New Zealand, Salvation Army, then that's a good book to read, and I can recommend that. Today we begin a series about the history of the Salvation Army, and in particular this Corps. My brief for today was to give some history about how the Salvation Army bands came about and became such a major part of our organisation, as well as some history about the Whangarei Corps Band. This may seem an unusual topic for a Sunday morning address, but brass bands have been a part of the scene almost since the Army's inception. To begin, my name is Arthur Lawrence. I have been a soldier and bandsman of this Corps for 65 years. I am a 4th generation Salvationist on my mother's side of the family and 3rd generation on my father's side of the family. Both grandfathers and 4 uncles from both sides of the family were bandsmen, as was my father and 3 of my siblings. There were also bandsmen in the wider family, so you could say banding is in my blood. It has been a large part of my life, but having said that, I am reminded that God does not have grandchildren. So I had to make a conscious decision to follow Jesus first and then serve him to the best of my ability. Salvation Army regulations for bandsmen and songsters remind us that we are Salvationists first, and as such devoted to the will and service of God, and that we should use our musical abilities to glorify him and for the saving of souls. In other words, we exist to proclaim the Army's message of salvation from sin through Jesus Christ and to accomplish the Army's purpose, the salvation of souls. It was never William Booth's intention to use brass bands. However, in the early days of the Christian mission, they began holding services in the city of Salisbury. They soon attracted the support of an itinerant preacher, Charles Fry, who, with his 3 sons, supported the outdoor efforts of the missioners. They brought their instruments, 2 cornets, a valve trombone, a euphonium along, and assisted with the music, and kept the rowdy, even hostile crowd under control. The group was often the target of flying tomatoes and rotten eggs. And so the first legendary band of the Salvation Army was formed, and the rest is history. The band format, which is in use today, broadly known as Standard British, consists of cornets, flugelhorn, tenor horns, baritones, euphoniums, trombones, both tenor and bass, E-flat and B-flat basses, and percussion. However, with careful choice of parts, as few as 4 players can be used. William Booth saw music as a means to an end. Christian music should attract people and speak the message of salvation to their hearts. To Booth, the instrumental music in and of itself had no moral force. The spiritual power of the associated texts and ideas, regardless of the tune chosen, made all the difference. Booth's approach to music was direct, simple, and practical. He advocated music that was attractive, carried a solid message, and in the process avoided the dangers of sophisticated church music. So what do Salvation Army bands do, and why? As emphasised in orders and regulations by which bands are administered, they attract people to the meetings, they accompany the singing and thereby help and enrich it, And 3, they convey by association ideas the salvation message direct to the hearts of the hearers, most likely when tunes or selections are wisely chosen. There are many who would say that brass bands are a thing of the past, that they are outdated and maybe past use-by date. But William Himes, a well-known Salvation Army composer and retired conductor of the Chicago Staff Band and educator, responds in a positive way as follows, and I quote, "In the first place, brass bands are flexible. Whether in a parade or festival, prison or cathedral, outdoors or indoors, the brass band can function more efficiently and effectively than any other instrumental combination." He continues, "Having taught high school bands, I know that weather can render wind instruments ineffective and inoperable, but brass instruments can function in wide extremes of temperature." And many of us can witness to that. A brass band is versatile. We, that is the Salvation Army, lead the way in production of quality brass music that can effectively be played by us US4 players, which sets feet toes tapping with gospel tunes known in and out of our movement. Have you ever heard a symphony orchestra play a march? It sounds pretty lame, doesn't it? Or have you heard a jazz band try to play a hymn tune? Somehow it just doesn't make it. Yet, from the March Stolake to Treasures of Tchaikovsky to How Great Thou Art, a brass band can play all of these and do so convincingly. A brass band is acoustical. In this day and age of electronic music with its synthesizers, drum machines, sequencers, recorded tape tracks, and megawatt amplifiers, it is refreshing to hear music produced by a group of committed Christian musicians that is pure, natural, and unamplified. And finally, a brass band is practical, and not many people think about this. The wonder of a brass band is, technically speaking, a model of simplicity. It might not seem to be to some people. From the cornet to the tuba or the bass, only one set of fingering and a working knowledge of the treble clef is required. Now, trombones require a different set of skills. With this working knowledge, participants can play, teach, and conduct brass ensembles with surprising proficiency, and no one who conducts a concert band or orchestra can make that claim. End of quote. The comment has also been made that we could not imagine a modern pop combination sitting on the back of a truck playing Christmas carols. Now to New Zealand. In the foreword of chapter 16 of Cyril Bradwell's book, Fight the Good Fight, that's this book I referred to, The Salvation Army in New Zealand, the author Bernard Watson writes, "One way to disarm the Salvation Army would be to take away its music. Without its songs, brass bands, guitars, timbrels, concertinas and drums, the army would be paralysed." You think about that. The first official meeting of the Salvation Army in New Zealand was held on Sunday, the 1st of April, 1883, led by Pollard and Wright. The very first issue of the War Cry on June the 16th, 1883, announced that Captain Ironsides Edwards was forming a brass band from among the first Christchurch converts. The second issue indicated that Dunedin was following suit, and by August, Pollard had issued a general order setting out a list of 9 common sense regulations that were to be observed by all corps forming bands. Music played a conspicuous part in the first Congress meetings held in Dunedin at Christmas 1883. That's only 6 months since the Salvation Army arrived in New Zealand. Now listen to this, with bands from Dunedin, Christchurch, Sydenham, Oamaru and Timaru taking part with a drum and fife band from South Dunedin. The Otago Donnelly Thames commented on the generally good standard of playing and especially the remarkable proficiency of the Christchurch and Timaru bands. During the next few years, as corps were established, bands became a common sight on New Zealand streets. However, many bands were prohibited from playing on the streets. Some were arrested and jailed, as well as being on the receiving end of rotten eggs, etc. In spite of this, the Salvation Army bands became an accepted part of the New Zealand scene. Interestingly enough, the Salvation Army stood apart for encouraging female musicians, including a few all-male female ensembles. The first all-male combination was formed at Christchurch and made its debut in the first weekend in September 1888. That's only 3 months after, it's 5 years after the army arrived here, eh? When the women played in one of Herbert Booth's meetings, he stated as far as he knew they were the first lassies band in the world. And a year later, the Whangarei Corps just south of Auckland formed its own lassies band under the direction of the Corps officer. Ensign George Jackson played a formative role in the development of Salvation Army music. He was a remarkably gifted young man. He became an officer in April 1888. And in spite of continued ill health, he acted in a number of capacities, among them being responsibility for the early issues of the New Zealand Brass Band Journal. He was an accomplished band trainer of both brass and vocal groups. On his last evening alive, while coughing up blood, he was still writing parts for the number 8 issue of the New Zealand Brass Band Journal. How's that for devotion? Would we be doing that today? He died the 27th of October 1893 of tuberculosis, aged 27. He is best known today for his song 497 in the songbook, and I read the words. I need to do this. In the form of a prayer, I want, dear Lord, a heart that's true and clean, a sunlit heart with not a cloud between, a heart like thine, a heart divine, a heart as white as snow on me, dear Lord, a heart like this bestow. I want, dear Lord, a love that cares for all, a deep, strong love that answers every call, a love like thine, a love divine, a love to come or go. On me, dear Lord, a love like this bestow. I want, dear Lord, a soul on fire for thee, a soul baptized with heavenly energy, a willing mind, a ready hand to do whate'er I know, to spread thy light wherever I may go. Something I believe we should all aspire to. Most towns and localities in New Zealand have had a brass band of some description, and many corps bands in small cities and small suburban corps have had fewer than 20 players and would be best described as brass ensembles. The rural-urban drift has also been a feature of New Zealand's sociological change since World War II, and we have been the sufferers of that. We kind of fall into that category. This has affected the size of rural corps and consequently the size of their bands. The effect has also been felt in suburban corps, where soldiers have elected to commute to Central City Corps rather than soldier in the suburbs. Consequently, many corps struggle to maintain bands of any size to accompany songs and meetings. However, to their credit, many corps have risen to the challenge and function well within their corps and community. From Whangarei to Invercargill, small bands are still involved in corps life. At the Congress held in Christchurch in 1907 in connection with the International Exhibition, 11 bands were present. Auckland, Newton, Gisborne, Dunedin, Fielding, Wellington South, Christchurch, Linwood, Sydenham, Dunedin and Invercargill. Their march through the city with 800 uniformed Salvationists brought out thousands of spectators, and their mass playing at the Monday night's festival under bandmaster Herbert Tremaine was described as a revelation and an inspiration. Over the years, many capable leaders set the spiritual and musical standards which have been maintained during the ensuing years. In 1935, the arrival of Major Dean Goffin as Secretary for Bands and Songsters ushered in a new era of musical development, and a surprisingly high standard was maintained by the Salvation Army bands during World War II. The post-war era saw bursts of creativity in numerous ways, the dominant figure being Dean Goffin, a composer of high quality, together with Herb Rive and Tom Rive, who was a lecturer in music at the Auckland University. And who can forget bandmaster Ray Cresswell of Motueka, a champion of small bands and a very capable composer of music admirably suited for small ensembles. Now to Whangarei. The Whangarei Corps of the Salvation Army was opened on the 28th of August 1892. And in a Whangarei report, the 28th of August 1893 records that the band, 2 cornets and a euphonium and a drum created quite a stir. They had already received official notice from the town board to hold no more open-air meetings, but they continued to witness in the streets. The 8th of April 1896, a party visited Kawakawa with the band being the main attraction. And in spite of the climb up to the public hall, 60 people attended the meeting. December 1900, a musical evening was held, described as passing off splendidly, with mention that the stringed instruments were quite an acquisition and the small band was continuing to show signs of improvement. Reports of 1903 indicated that the band was still improving. They played only salvation music and attendances at open-air meetings were good. May 1907, the Corps Band joined with the Rifle Corps and the town band to march to the hospital where suitable music was played. It was considered a success both spiritually and financially. I should say that you've probably been seeing some pictures up on the wall. I'd forgotten about these. I need to add that all the band photos are still in storage but these are some that I had in the file, and I just hope you can recognise a few people and find some interest in them. I think this is an open-air service in Fifth Avenue. Have we shown the picture with the youngsters there as well? 1961. Yeah. 1908, Bandmaster Hammond was farewell to Matamata and Matamata was described as an outpost of Cambridge. That's interesting. He had been the bandmaster for 7 years and worked hard in the interests of the band. With the arrival of the Rive family and the Philpott family in 1922, music sections received a huge boost. A standard was set in proclaiming the gospel through musical excellence that is still in existence today. And I might add that our present bandmaster is a descendant of the Rive family. By 1932, a fine band and songster brigade were operating under the leadership of bandmaster John Rive, with regular visits to the hospital as part of the program. In 1936, Brother Len Harvey and brother and sister Harold Jenkins were welcomed to the Corps. They too were to make their mark on the Corps both musically and spiritually. And it was not long after that the original male quartet was formed, consisting of Harold Jenkins, Ernie Holdaway, Herb Rive and Len Harvey. 1939 through 1945, in spite of a number of bandsmen being overseas on active duty, the band continued to function well, and with the cessation of hostilities in May 1945, the band assisted at the local Thanksgiving services which were held in the town hall. March 1950, the band assisted at the opening of the Coates Memorial Church at Matakawi, and the band continued to improve under the leadership of bandmasters Bert Vile and Len Harvey, and in 1956 took delivery of a new set of instruments. The band and timbrelist visited Te Aroha during Queen's Birthday Week in 1958, a visit described as outstanding. A shock to the Corps and the band was the sudden promotion to glory of Brother Jack Ford on 14th of June 1960. At the time of his passing, he was the YP band and singing company leader, as well as the Corps drummer. He possessed the gift for instructing young people in the art of music making and was a fine example of a true Salvationist. And at the time, he was also the music teacher and band organiser at the boys' high school. In July 1964, bandmaster Len Harvey retired and bandmaster Philip Robertson was commissioned as bandmaster, a position he still holds. Over all the years, the band has continued to minister with visits to various outlying areas such as Dargaville, Whangarei for soirees. Who will forget those, especially the singing of a certain lady? We visited Kaio, Waipu, Langs Beach and especially Kaitaia for the reopening of the Corps there. And who can forget the trip to Congress the band and songsters made in March 1959? On Friday afternoon, we travelled to Auckland by private car, boarded a bus, and travelled to Wellington overnight. Along the way, the bus developed mechanical problems around Utaku in the middle of the night. On arrival, we attended rehearsals, went to billets, participated in the Congress meetings Saturday and Sunday, and on Sunday afternoon had boarded the bus back to Auckland, arriving back in the early hours of Monday morning, and then by private car back home. Such was our devotion. That's how it was in those days, folks. And though it was quite a mission, we enjoyed it. It was part of what we were. It was our life. I can't emphasise that more. We lived and we ate and we did everything. It was army. That was our life. It was our social life. It was the whole shooting box. But yeah, that was life. May the 14th, 1971, retired bandmaster Len Harvenley was suddenly called to his heavenly home. He was actually mowing the lawns outside his house when this happened. Major Jackson conducted the service, at which Corps Sergeant Major Harold Jenkins and bandmaster Bert Vile paid tributes. The funeral cortege led by the band was to be the last of this traditional custom because of interference with traffic. Now, you did see a funeral cortege back there. That was back in the 1930s, but that used to continue right up until bandmaster Len Harvey's funeral. March 18, 1970, as a result of a top-dressing accident, Brother Donald Jenkins was promoted to glory. He was one of our bandsmen, played trombone. He will always be remembered for his sense of humour and faithfulness as a soldier of Jesus Christ. 1983, the band led a centenary salute parade on Saturday, July the 2nd, and then together with the songsters and timbrelists presented music in the mall. A centenary program was featured at the Citadel that evening. I just put a note on the side here, and when the Auckland Cathedral was, new Anglican Cathedral was opened, the band took part in a festival there. Remember that, Philip? And whoever was in charge described the Whangarei band as a little band with a big sound. So it must have impressed him. I think, never forget that, and I can't remember who the person was. But it was a privilege to be there too in the celebration of the opening of that new cathedral. While all the foregoing is of interest, the band over all the years has continued to be a part of the Corps program with participation in Sunday services, regular open-air meetings, which unfortunately have gone by the board now, visits to hospital, old folks' homes, retirement villages, etc., as well as weekly rehearsals. We were involved in our mission as Salvation Army soldiers and bandsmen. It was our life. We were in it hook, line and sinker and loved it. During all this time, there were a number of numerous events which deserve mention. The driver of the truck during Christmas carolling who accidentally hit the tipping lever on the back of the truck. The bandsman whose feet had nothing to do with the music he was playing when he was on the march. Can you think about that? Yes. Every Sunday night, the band marched from the Citadel down Rust Avenue, through the lights to the open-air site in Cameron Street, outside the old Whangarei Hotel, which is now where the mall is. We had no drum major at the time, so control of the band was carried out by the bandmaster with a whistle. As we approached the lights, they turned red and the cross now signal was displayed. The officer concerned was not familiar with the sequence, so he came to a halt. But because we had not heard the signal, the band simply parted and marched around him. I can't remember the consequences, but never mind. Did he? Today, for many of us, the band is our home group. Where we share precious time together and encourage each other in our Christian walk. And the final word from the autobiography forward of Brindley Boone, a Salvation Army officer, composer and editor, come these words, which I think speak for themselves and with which I conclude. Today, and this doesn't imply just a bandsman, today, Salvationists still make the Salvation Army their spiritual home. But there was a period in the history of the movement, which might have now passed, when Salvationists joined up hook, line and sinker. The army was their whole life. It was their family, their social life, and for many of us, we met our life's partners there as well. Their nationality and their identity. May God bless you, each one. Thank you.